Live streaming is on, which means if you're not comfortable with your face being shown on YouTube, please turn your camera off now. Otherwise, you're very welcome to keep it on if you want to. I'm going to mute people, so I'm going to please ask you to stay with the microphone muted for the duration of the webinar. We will take questions towards the end of the session. Please use the chat if you want to introduce yourself. Tell us your name, where you're joining from, and the name of your project. If you have questions during the webinar, you can throw them in the chat and we will address them towards the end. Okay, I think 6 o'clock on the dot, we can get started. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, let's do it.
Welcome to today's session, Getting Funders to Come to You. This session is hosted by members of the Funding Circle Services team. During this call, that's Paul and myself. Paul will be doing the most of the heavy lifting today. We also have Anton here from the Digital Circle, who is supporting us from a tech perspective. The session is being live broadcast on YouTube. If you don't want your face to be shown on YouTube, you can turn off your camera, please. If you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the chat. Do not unmute and speak out during the session if you could. If you want to tell us your name, where you're from, and the name of your projects, please do that in the chat. And it's always good to see who's in the room and all the different projects that are around the world. I'm just going to cover our partners and so on. So let me see. The duration of the webinar is around 1 hour of meaty material, and then we will have around half hour to take any questions. We're also going to have with us, hopefully, Maria, who will answer who will give us her perspective from an association's view, what makes a project better funded or more fundable. And so this is going to be a very interesting session, hopefully. It may be that we finish a little earlier or that we take the full time, depending on how participative you guys are, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. Please turn your mics off. Okay, our team members for the funding circle, that's Paul, myself, and Hans, who couldn't be here today. Our website is perma.earth/funding circle. With this, we will also share a copy of the presentation after the event, as well as the link to the recording, so you can watch it if you've missed anything. And also, we have another website called fundingreadiness.org, which basically provides a lot of information for increasing funding capacity for grassroots projects, permaculture associations, organizations, and networks. Our fantastic co-hosts, the first and I think most important one is the International Permaculture Collaborative Laboratory. The Funding Circle is a part. Oh, I'm getting feedback. A part of the collab. We call the International Permaculture Collaborative Laboratory collab for short. So you might hear this being mentioned. And we thank them for funding this project. So the Funding Circle is provided funding to produce educational material for increasing funding capacity, especially targeting permaculture, grassroots projects, organizations, networks, and associations. We also collaborate with the Permaculture Association, the Digital Circle, who is also part of the collab, who is supporting us from a tech support perspective, the European Permaculture Network, who are partnering with us for nearly all of the webinars that we've hosted so far, and I'm sure they will also co-host next one, so they help us with amplifying the impact and reaching more people. We also have the Raft Foundation, which is a fiscal host based in the US, who helps us make accessible US funding to other parts of the world. And then we have the Stichting Agriculture Foundation, which is also a fiscal host, but is European based. And all of these co-hosts help us to multiply our impact and be able to reach more funding and make available more funding to permaculture. Hopefully today Maria will join us from the Permaculture Association of Britain as well towards the end of the call and to share her perspective on this. Okay, just a moment. If you are not muted, please mute yourself. Good. So these are our co-hosts, and now I think I can pass on directly to Paul. What do you think, Paul?
I'm ready. Yes. And fantastic to see so many people here from looking like um, many different parts of the world, indoors, outdoors. Fantastic to see the outdoor people. Yeah, um, great to see you all. Many of you, I imagine, didn't realize that you were going to have to be fundraisers, but then all of a sudden found out that you had to become a fundraiser. Some of you might be full-time fundraisers, many of you part-time, juggling many different things. So fantastic to see you. Great that you've taken time to come to this webinar, and I hope it's useful. This is part of a funding readiness series that we've been starting to run. There was another webinar previous to this, which we can give you the details of. And there is actually a website that's around organizations probably towards the beginning of their fundraising journey, but also I think things that are applicable to really all organizations who are trying to raise funds and to get funding ready so that they really can get funding, grow, and have fantastic impact. But we wanted to look particularly at this area, and why talk about this subject of getting funders to come to you. Well, we talk with a lot of smaller organizations, grassroots organizations who are looking for funding, and the first thing they often come to us is with a proposal. Here's our proposal. Look at it, and we read it and we go, well, that's a great proposal, a very, very good proposal. And there's a lot of information out there about how to write a good proposal. But then we look deeper and we start to look at the organization as a funder would, look at their website, their social media, look at how they communicate with funders via LinkedIn or however they do, or via email. And then you start to see that maybe there are some issues with that funding readiness in that respect, because the way that we establish connections and relationships with funders outside of that grant proposal is really, really important. And there's some reasons why, as we can start to look at. If we go to the next slide. So first of all, competition is pretty fierce out there. Actually, just a recent example from me. I was looking recently at a call for match funding for an organization called Mar Earth, who some of you, I'm sure, applied to. I can see one or two people who did apply to that, the Mar Earth funding, which was purely for sustainable agriculture, lots of agroecology, permaculture, and associated types of projects. And I saw, looking at it, that in Kenya alone, there were 25 projects that looked very similar agroecology, permaculture, just in Kenya. And they had 3 or 4 paragraphs to explain their project. And I thought, boy, you imagine the funder sitting there, they're reading 24, 25 things that are practically the same. How do they differentiate? Which ones do we choose? And I can tell you the answer. It's because they look outside of that proposal. They look at websites, social media, they ask trusted advisors, they look around, and that's how they can actually pick and choose. They don't simply just look at it blindly, your proposal. So really understanding that competition is super fierce. I mean, in 2025, there was a state of grant seeking report, and they were talking about how really the larger NGOs were getting the bulk of the funding, and the smaller NGOs were just really competing against thousands of others. and the percentage of being successful was very, very low. So you really need to bump that percentage up by doing other things outside of your proposal, which we can come on to. The second thing, Amy, on the next slide, is that one of the reasons why competition is fierce is around there's just fewer opportunities. How many of you, I mean, put your hand up, or you know, make some kind of recognition that you've been to a funder's website and they say, we are no longer accepting unsolicited proposals. Or I say, I'm saying here, saying lots of people want to speak. Yeah, I bet it happens to a lot. Or they're also saying things like, you know, we we're not accepting applications, or now we work through advisors, or you know, we're simply no, we've closed the call. Even the calls close very quickly due to massive demand, or we're not going to have a call next year because of massive demand this year. And I saw some research on African philanthropy that was saying that, you know, funders, they're moving away from open calls. They're moving away from that process, and they're relying instead on seeking out the best organizations, often through their employees, their networks, or what they call trusted advisors. So they're asking people to go out and find the best organizations for them to fund rather than having open calls. Agroecology Fund is a really good example of this. Just this year, they listed the African, well, I think it was the global advisors that they would be using to choose grantees. So no open calls anymore. So that is also another big reason why you know it's very hard, very competitive out there. And you know, it's good because funders are trying to localize, right? They want decisions to be made locally by local experts. So that makes sense. They don't want to make decisions, you know, in New York or London. They want those decisions to be made locally. So it is good, but it means that we have to fundraise in a different way. I'm just giving a pause so that the camera can go back to the slides. But then the third slide, the third kind of reason is this idea of out of sight is out of mind. So it's about visibility. And I'll give you another story. My wife used to work for Save the Children. Has everyone heard of Save the Children? Massive international charity. And they had more than one person whose job was literally to answer the phone to funders. Funders would phone up Save the Children and say, right, I have £500,000. What can you spend it on? Not because they didn't know, maybe they don't even know what Save the Children are doing, but Save the Children are incredibly visible. They're everywhere and they're very credible. You know, you assume they do great work. So therefore, funders come to them because of their visibility and their credibility. Now, we can't be Save the Children, us, but there are things that we can do to make ourselves more visible and more credible in the eyes of funders. So these are some of the reasons why, you know, it's important that we think beyond our project proposal and we start to think about how we can attract funders to come to us. So we're not always going to them, that they are finding us, becoming interested in us, and reaching out to us. Or at least when we reach out to them, there are some connections, they know who we are. So if we go on to the next slide. So this is a method that I've used over the years called the window and bridge method. This is not a magic formula. I want to set that out straight away. It really is just a process of hard work that's applied in a common sense way. So what you might call smart working. Yeah, we have limited time. I completely recognize we're all so busy. We've got so many other things to do. Fundraising is often a part-time or additional thing for us. So it needs to be really, really smart. And that isn't necessarily just writing applications. There are ways that we can be smarter in what we do and be more effective and more efficient. So this is what I call the window and bridge method. And it's basically 2 stages of kind of relational fundraising. So first of all, you need to create a window between your work and a funder and the decision makers that work at a funder and their trusted advisors. You need them to be able to see and understand what you do, what impact you have, and why you're a fantastic organization. So that's really, really important. But also, the window is two-way because you also need to be able to see the funder and really understand them, what their objectives are, their priorities, the constraints they have, the limitations they have in their funding, and also their culture. You know, how do they feel about the things that you feel about? Yeah. They might have a different view or a different lens of those things, and you need to understand those if you're going to communicate with them. So the window is an important first step. And let's start with the window about making yourself visible, getting on the funder's radar, yeah, which we all can say is an important thing. So what I want you to do, first of all, is think of a funder that you want to engage, someone that you've looked at, you know, a fund, agroecology fund, some other fund, depending on the type of work that you do. So think about that funder. Now imagine if they held an open call now and you made an application and that funder is looking at your application and they read your name, the name of your organization at the top, would it ring any bells to them? Have a look at the slide that we're looking at now. Would they be saying any of those things? Would they be saying, ah, yeah, I remember them. They wrote a great blog, or they had a really interesting video they put on YouTube, or I read about them in a newspaper, or they gave a really interesting webinar recently, or they were at a conference I attended, or they're members of a network that we are members of, or even, you know, when we post on LinkedIn, they comment and they interact back with us. And very importantly, at least, oh, well, I went and I could find their website easily and it was very clear and informative. All of these things, and there are many more. And if you think of many more examples, do put them in the chat. But have a think about the ideal funder for you. Would, when they read your name, would any of these things click? Would they know about you? Would they know you exist? Would they know that you're visible? Because if not, that is something that you need to work on. These are areas where you can, not all of them, I'm aware there's a lot there, there's a lot of work, but these are the types of things that you can do to make yourself visible. And it does start with your website, which is really, you know, the best way to start. So looking at the next slide, I don't want to go through this too quickly, but looking at the next slide. So the first thing is about building your online presence. Yeah, so starting with some kind of website, and we can offer support and help and guidance on this. Us and our partners at the Permaculture Collab, we can really support in understanding how you can create websites, work in the digital space in a very ethical way. So please let us know if you're interested in that. But critically, you know, your website has to be very clear about the impact you're trying to produce. It has to be very compelling because obviously there's need everywhere. Why? Why is what you're doing very urgent and very important? You know, you have to get that message across on your website in a very clear way. And it has to be credible. You have to show that you are an organization, even though you need money, you're an organization that is coherent and stable and sustainable and ethical, and that one that if they support you, you are going to have incredible impact, and you're working for a community that has a great need, and really important as well, it has to be kept up to date. I've been seeing a lot recently. You go to a website, you go to their news section, and there's an article from 2024, or there's a, you know, everything's a bit out of date, and then you don't even know if that organization's still going, if they're still around. So it's important to keep your website ticking over. Similarly, around LinkedIn, um, it's really important, if you haven't done so already, to get an organizational page. It's very simple to do, very easy. Get an organizational page, invite all your followers that you personally have, and your team and the people that you around you have, get them to invite people, add regular content, make sure that you actually reply to your own content, put the links to things in the first post, etc., etc. We could do a whole session on using LinkedIn, maybe at another time. If you think that's important, do get in touch with us, because we can. Amy particularly is an expert on LinkedIn and how to use it effectively. Make sure you follow the funders and people that you're really interested in. Make sure you're following them. Make sure you're liking and commenting that your posts, because that makes you visible to them. Trust me that funders do look at who likes and comments on their posts, and they do interact. So it's a great way of gaining some visibility with funders. And of course, many funders, they host webinars and other events that funders are holding and attending. So try and get on those to those webinars if you can, or watch them later if you can't, because most of them go up online. And as part of all that, great to write thought leadership content. You're experts, right? You have to remember this. Yeah, you're experts in things that the funders you're targeting, or should be targeting, are interested in. You should have the solutions to their problems. So get your thought leadership out. Short articles, don't have to be long. Short articles or blogs on your website, on LinkedIn, that demonstrate your expertise. The funders, they want to see intellectual leadership in a theme from the organizations they fund, not just project descriptions. Yeah. So do try and get those. Also, it's important on your website and in social media to get out, to show your impact, demonstrate your impact. That impact has to be both, quantitative, data led, to convince people's heads, people's brains that you should be supported, and it also has to be qualitative, human narratives. So it gets to the heart, so that people really feel, wow, I want to support this organization because I believe in what they do. So getting that evidence of impact out is really important. Getting testimonials from your communities that you support, really important. Another area about being visibility is actually funders often have their own initiatives. Sometimes they have accelerators, academies, thematic working groups, leadership programs that are often free to join. And being present in those spaces obviously signals great alignment and commitment from you and your organization to be part of their solutions for whatever they're trying to achieve. So look out for those. That comes through following them, following everything, and then try and join those. And then the last thing is around consistency as well, around regular information. So you're regularly updating quarterly newsletters, LinkedIn posts, impact reports. Once again, I know this is all a lot of work, but it's much harder at the beginning. And then once you get into a routine and a rhythm, you can actually do these things quite quickly. And it keeps you top of mind for the funders and advisors scanning the landscape. So that's around building your presence. I'm just stopping, just having a look in the chat. Don't want to rush through too quickly for anybody.
Before we continue, Paul, just a note for people with poor Wi-Fi, it may be easier for you to follow this webinar from the YouTube. I've put the link in the chat if you're having issues with the slides. So you can hop off the call and then come back later if you have questions towards the end, so we can take your questions. But to watch the webinar, if you want to look at the slides at the same time, it may be easier to watch the live stream for poor data connections, especially. So that's just some housekeeping. You please continue.
Thanks, Amy. So that's one side of the window, right? So if funders come and look at you, they can see you, they can understand you. But critical to that, because when they look in, what they want to see is a reflection, right? So what they want to see is, these guys are speaking our language. That's an expression, is it? These guys are speaking our language. They look like they've got the solutions to our problems. And you achieve that by really understanding your funders. And you can try this. You can try this, when you finish, take the ones here that are on the screen. How many of these are true for you and your organization? Do you know who your priority funders are? And do you know why they are priority funders? Or are you just applying to anything that comes open? If you do have a list of priority funders, have you read their annual reports? Do you know what their priorities are? Do you know what their limitations are, the types of things they don't fund? Have you looked at who they've funded before to see, are there trends in who they fund? Do you know who their decision makers are? If you go to about pages and LinkedIn, you can find out who the decision makers are, because that's very important, obviously, to being able to engage them. Have you signed up to their mailing lists? Do you know what conferences and webinars they host and attend? These are all, and there are many more. And please do, if you can think of another example, please do put it in the chat. Have a think about, as an organization, is this true for you? Because if it isn't, you might want to try one of them, a few of them, and see if it really helps you to know what funders are looking for, so that you can adjust your communications appropriately. And one of the other key things here is about language. Language it's really important, as I said before, that you speak the language of the funder. A good example is permaculture. I don't know how many of you are engaged in permaculture. Many of the organizations we work with are, but I can tell you the vast majority of the funders do not talk about permaculture. They talk about agroecology. They talk about sustainable farming, other things like agroforestry, organic farming, etc., etc. Permaculture very rarely comes up in the funding calls and on the websites of funders. There's no point having a conversation about why that is right now, but that is a conversation that is happening in and around groups I'm having. But so for you, if that is something that you do, you have to think about, well, do I start adopting the language of the funders? Do I stop saying permaculture and start saying agroecology? Or do I need to explain in my website, social media, blogs, things like that, how permaculture is actually something that can, add value to agroecological practices? Or is the design system where agroecology is the techniques, or however you want to do it? But you have to recognize what funders think, feel, and know about, for example, permaculture versus agroecology, how they talk about it, and how you do. And if they're fundamentally different, funders may not go with you and go with somebody else who does speak like them. So that's a really important thing to look at. Obviously, it doesn't apply to just permaculture, it applies across the board. Have a look at what language they use, how they describe things, how they describe problems and solutions, and make sure that your language aligns. So that's the window. Just coming on to the next slide. In order to create that other side of the window, looking at funders. You need to build your funder hit list, prioritize. I would suggest, not to give yourself too much work, that you have a constant priority list of between like 5 and 10 funders, depending on how much capacity you have. Have a kind of a criteria funder you're looking at based on the type of work you do, the size that you're looking for. What's the funding envelope you're looking for? Is it 10,000? Is it 2,000? Is it 100,000? Do you have ethical considerations about the types of funders you'd like to work with? So you need to develop your funding hit list, and then obviously spend a bit of time going to the funder website and their pages and their LinkedIn, finding their key employees, and the key employees, not necessarily the CEO, by the way. Don't write to the CEO. Try and focus on project managers and advisors that really match your work geographically and thematically, because they're far more likely to engage with you and respond to you. Obviously, follow them, as we've discussed. Reach out to them. Critically, when you reach out to them, you must make a link between your work and their priorities. Many people even write to me, and they write straight to me with their proposal for their project. And what that says to me is, you don't know anything about me. You don't know whether what you're saying, is something that I want or something that I want to address. You're kind of just desperately firing it out. But if you can make a connection, if you can say, I noticed that, your organization is really focused on this, and this is a key challenge you want to work with. Well, actually, we do something in that field and we apply it in this way, and I think it's something you'd be really interested in. If you can make that connection, you're much more likely to get engagement. And this is starting to get us into the bridging start part of the thing. So we've already done the window then, but you need to start to walk across that bridge. That allows you to enter their world, the funder's world. It also allows the funder to enter your world and your spaces. Plus, it allows you both to go to shared spaces, third-party spaces, conferences, etc., as peers, not necessarily as grantor and grantee, which, as we'll come to, is really important. So once again, take a look at the speech bubbles. These are some ways that you can start to make that bridge, a stable bridge between you and a funder. And what you'll notice about these is that most of them, and in most ways, it's not about asking for money. And this is really important, because what you want to do when you build bridges in a relational way with funders is you want to move the focus away from money and to the problem that both of your organizations are trying to solve. Yeah, it's about, we're all trying to solve hunger, or food security, the environment, health, whatever it is, specific things we're trying to solve. We're both experts in it, right? That's how you build a bridge. You don't build a bridge saying the relationship between us is that you've got money and we haven't, right? That doesn't work. So have a look at those speech bubbles and think about, which of those have you done or could you do? Are there other examples you can think that create that bridge? I'll give you an example. It's probably a bit of an extreme example, but I was at a networking event at it was a networking event anyway, and it was about people just generally coming together to look at a particular challenge. And I realized that I was sitting on the same table of 6 people as AJ Banga, who was the head of MasterCard Foundation, is now the head of the World Bank. But we were just there, 6 people, talking about how you solve a particular problem. And I remember that I said something, and he looked at me, and then he pulled a little pen out of his pocket, and he wrote it down and put the pad back in his pocket. It was the greatest moment of my fundraising life. Of course, he didn't know that I was a fundraiser. until at the end I gave him my card, and his team got in contact, and eventually we started to do work together. But the point being was, when we were in that space together, we were just people trying to solve a problem. If I'd just gone up to him and said, I'm a fundraiser, we've got a great program, can you give us money for it? That probably would have worked less well. So there are several ideas on here, about how you can create that bridge. Once again, I wouldn't focus on AJ. I wouldn't focus on the CEOs and the really top people, but have a look at those trusted advisors in your area. Those people who are often working. I realize, for example, in Kenya, the Agroecology Fund, that their advisors are peer organizations of ours, and organizations that I work with. They're not, they are people who are doing the same thing. They've just been trusted. So it's about engaging them on a peer way, in a peer way. Invite them to speak at your webinar, invite them to contribute or give feedback on your research paper or on something that you're doing. If it's someone local, invite them to come and see your farm, do a learning exchange, something like that. That's how you start to build these bridges with funders before you start talking about money. Or you can also ask, if you have board members, or if you have government partners, or if you already have a funder, try and build a bridge to another funder by asking them to connect you, in order to do one of these things. This partnership building is a really, this bridge building, I think, is a really important space. Once again, I know it's a lot of work, and also if you're a small organization in a very rural part of the world, you might think, wow, how can I do this? But if you can get online, it is possible to start making these connections. So if we look at the next slide, we say like network, and I know a lot of people, particularly in the permaculture world, I don't know how many of you are in that world or in the green space, they hate networking and the idea of networking, and think it's a very, I mean, I do as well, in a way, that it's, there's something wrong about it. But you have to think about it in a different way. It's about understanding each other, right? I think we all agree that sometimes, and funders that I speak to, that they very often agree, they don't always understand what's happening. And so it's very difficult for them to give money and decide where that money should go, because they don't have that level of understanding. There's not that window that's so clear, about what's happening out there and what are the best way to solve challenges. And we're all trying to solve the same challenges. So it's about developing shared understanding and relationships so that people can make better decisions. And in a way, we all have a responsibility to educate funders by reaching out to them and not just saying, give us money for this project, but making sure that they understand what the challenges are with your communities in your areas. So that's, it's really important. What I would say is, like, if all of this seems very overwhelming, I would just try and do one small part of this. So, for example, maybe after today, identify, just go through the process, identify a funder, go and look on their website, try and understand what their interests are, what their objectives are, priorities. Have a look at their about page, see who the main people are, the decision makers. Hopefully try and find one that's aligned with what you do thematically and geographically, but otherwise just try and choose people. Then go on to LinkedIn, see if they're there. Don't message them straight away. Try and follow them if you can. Try and comment on things that they post, see what they do. And if you can, try and join a webinar that they present or that they're on. And this is something that I do all the time. If I go to a webinar and if I see people that are interesting to me and they say something, I immediately go onto LinkedIn and I say, hi, X, really interesting to hear your thoughts on Y. We at my organization have the same thinking. We are doing this and that. It'd be great to swap notes at some point. Great to connect. Yeah, something like that. And you're much more likely to start building a bridge if you can really make that connection. You've heard them. You're listening to them. You're not just saying, "Hi, I have this program. We need this money. It's very important." You're saying, "I recognize you. I recognize what you're saying. You are like-minded with me. We should be communicating because we are two experts in our field and we are trying to address the same problem and we have the same communities that we want to help at heart." That's really what you're trying to achieve. So do get out there, try and see if you can just look back at the slides, look back at the bubbles, see if there's things that you haven't yet done, you haven't yet tried, and just try them out, because it really is a muscle. It might seem like a huge amount of work at the moment, but try small things, slowly build them up, and you'll find that you get into a routine, and that slowly but surely, even if funders don't directly come to you or their advisors, when you make that application to an open call or to as a letter of inquiry or something like that, something will trigger in their mind. Oh yeah, I know that, I've heard of those guys. I saw their website, or I saw them at a conference, or I saw them on LinkedIn, or one of my advisors mentioned them, or a government partner mentioned them. And that's just enough just to bump you up to the top of the pile amongst all those other organizations that are fighting together. So that's, I think, enough talking from me. I feel like I've been talking for ages. I hope that's useful. I know it's going through things very quickly, but do go back. I think we can send you the slides, but we do have we've got plenty of time for questions. So what I suggest, Amy, is maybe if people have any questions, they can write them in the chat, and so we build up some questions. But meanwhile, we can bring in another perspective from Maria. I think Maria's here, right? Amy, am I correct? Maria, you here?
Maria is here. She was here at least.
I am.
Yes,
I am here.
She's here. I
Great.
see
Hi,
you.
Maria.
You want
So
to put
just to introduce
your
Maria,
camera?
Maria Paez is the international coordinator at the Permaculture Association of Britain. So she works extensively with organizations, small organizations often around the world, who are looking to gain funding, to connect with other organizations. They're looking up from their work and they're trying to work out, how do I connect my work to the rest of the world and get some support. And so she's in a really good position. She's also an organization that does a lot of re-granting on behalf of funders, so she knows a lot about funders as well. So it would be great, Maria, to get your thoughts on, what would you say are the key things funders look for in an organization before they decide to reach out to them? What kind of due diligence are they doing, so that, to help organizations make sure they're prepared for that?
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
We can't see you, Maria. Maybe your camera is not quite working.
It's on, but
I see you now. There you go.
Okay. Thank you so much, Paul, and what a rich talk. So much information there that you've been sharing. All I completely agree with. In terms of your question, before I answered, I want to say that although there are organizations and funders that are proactive in looking at grassroots organizations and small projects that they want to support, that is a trend that is happening. There is still the usual way, which is the open calls. There are less, but still a lot. So I would just say, don't stop looking for opportunities, because they are still there and there are loads of them. But yes, there is a trend that hopefully I think is good. Because it's more this trend about understanding more the projects and looking at them through what they share on social media, or who knows about that project is kind of more important. And I would say from our perspective and based on the experience we have had, the key aspect is trust. Trust, knowing that whoever is contacting us, and Paul, you made me smile because you said you just described the emails that we receive from someone who is new to us, and they are asking for support, and they send us a well-structured proposal, and then we look at where they are based, who are they working with, what is the community they are working with, who are they, what is the main problem, what is the main issue, what they have done in the past. And it is very common that we cannot find information. So what we do is to have a conversation with that organization, whoever contact us, and develop that relationship. So it's kind of the long way. So if you have the resources to, as Paul said, to make yourself, your organization visible through the different platforms that we have today, that would be like a shortcut. If you don't have those ones, and I do, many of the organizations we work with, they are really grassroots organizations, do not have capacity to work on all these platforms and being active on different channels. Send an email and say, ask for just a call, a 10-minute call, and you can tell them what you are about. Be prepared for many of them not to answer. That happens. And yeah, there are reasons why that happens. It's not that they don't want to know about yourself or your organization. It's just that they are receiving many of those ones. But if it's for you, and if there is anything in that organization that they can see in your project, you will receive a reply, and you will receive a sort of a slot to have a conversation. So yes, it's good to make sure that you are proactive, but yeah, continue looking for opportunities. Another aspect, I would say, and again, back to what Paul mentioned, when you have that conversation, putting money in between you and the funder is not helpful. It makes the other person feel, and especially we are dealing with people. So although we are representing an organization, the money is not in our pockets. There are some processes, and there are some things that we need to follow, and that takes time. So money, starting the conversation with "we need money" is not the best way to do. It is more about, yes, the problem, the community that you are supporting, the story behind that. And then over time, you start to find a common ground between your organization and what the organization you are approaching is interested in supporting. So another aspect connected to that is, instead of starting to think about what you need and what money you need to support your project, start from what do we have? What do we have in place? And in many of the cases with grassroots organizations, it is about knowledge that is unique to your community, the assets within the community. Sometimes it's time, sometimes it's the relationships that already exist in your community, and identify them and really value them, because we all do this, and I think it's a human thing, to take many of these things for granted, but they are so valuable. So yeah, first of all, instead of thinking what do what money do we need, is appreciating what you already have, and from there you will start to think about linking that to the issues and the problems that are within your community. And then that conversation is reshaped. It's not around money, it is about the community, the work you've done, the relationship you have with the community, the aspirations you have. So yes, I would say that's the views that we can share. The point about partnership is as well important. Funders are looking more for collectives. So if you have organizations close where you are working, who are probably, from your point of view, sometimes you might see them as a very similar project as well, competing for the same resources, start to see them as allies, because you could be working together and maybe you will find that they have strengths that you don't have, and vice versa. So if you could team up, you would be stronger in front of a funder. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thanks, Maria. That's really, yes, a lot of that really resonated. Obviously, they were working these same areas, and so it's great to reinforce a lot of those things, because they are important, and it is something that we see all the time. The way that, particularly the way organizations communicate up to funders, we need to kind of change that a little bit. Brilliant. But I think maybe if we go into any questions, either to me, obviously, or Maria or Amy.
We've got some questions in the chat. Well, one was a comment where we were talking about understanding the funders. Someone commented, become the funder. And I think that's a really interesting thought, to really dive into not only understanding the fund, what the funder is doing, at a very on the headspace level, but also to understand that there is quite a lot of process involved in dealing with these with the grants and applications, and that there are processes and decision making things that have to be respected. So, for example, within the collab, we have some small community-led funding process by which the collab members can present their ideas, projects to be funded, and then the community decides through a consent process what's funded. So if there is no understanding of this process, it can become very frustrating, because you don't understand why the limit is so small. You don't understand why it takes so long for the process to happen. And so reading about the grants and the grant processes, looking at the timelines and looking at the reporting requirements and so on and so forth, then can help you understand better from the funder's perspective the kind of hoops they're trying to jump onto to make the best decision possible for the amount of money they have available. Because money is not infinite, and there is absolutely infinitely more need than there is money. Right? So there's always this kind of scarcity issue. Maybe you want to talk a little bit into this, Paul.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, in terms of thinking like a funder, I mean, the thing that I always try and do when I support organizations is to think like the funder that they want to attract. And then I ask, the organizations, I come up with a kind of a list of reasons why, as a funder, I wouldn't fund this organization, to help the organization to then address those needs. Like, oh, they don't have a website, or I don't know if the organization will sustain beyond the money that I give them, or how do I know that they're not just going to run off? So these types of questions. But what I would say about getting into a funder's head about being a funder, it's kind of true. Like, many of you will know about peer organizations, other projects around you in your area. Thinking from a funder's perspective, if they only have a limited money and they can only support one or two of you, how does that, how would they choose? And that might really help you to clarify, what you're trying to achieve. In terms of, I don't know about being a funder, but certainly if you are a small organization or have a small project, you might want to actually find peer projects and try to band together and use your joint capacity to make joint applications, which might help to make you more visible, and also to attract funders. Because funders are often looking for, unfortunately, many ways, they're looking for scale. They're looking for projects that they know can hit. They might have a number in mind, how many farmers they want to reach, or how much carbon they want to release. So there are these things that you need to, and the way that you understand the funders is by looking at their websites, looking at their reports, looking about who they partner with, how they speak, and how they communicate. But that does take time. I'm aware of that.
And to add to that, if you are permaculture and permaculture aligned and you join the International Permaculture Collab, you could also ask if there are any partners in your area of projects, if there's any potential partnership or collaborations that you could develop there. So there's a opportunity there within the collab to use the platform as a networking opportunity. These calls are a part of that, and of course, collab members there's also lots of benefits to this. So there'll be more funding, capacity, readiness building, information, and so on. But it's also an opportunity to network with other similar style projects to exchange ideas and information, and potentially also collaborate on joint applications. Shall we move on to the next question? Yeah. Okay, so this one's from Seth. He says, we approach funding from an entrepreneurial path. Where does one begin to find funders, and what are the keywords? Now, I'm an expert at this because I do a lot of research to add funding opportunities on our funding opportunities database. And the main source of funding and funders and funding opportunities is on LinkedIn. This is where all the professional organizations of today are networking and presenting their work. They're putting out their call outs. My advice is get on there, follow the funders, and put in the, for example, you mentioned entrepreneurial things, so you could look up for grants for entrepreneurs, put in some keywords, experiment. If you have a zero start, you don't know where to start, look up, use the filters on our funding opportunities database to identify a few, go on LinkedIn, follow those ones, and then the algorithm will serve you more of that. Follow, like, repost, engage with the funders, go to their webinars, just like Paul was saying, and yes, more and more opportunities will become available to you, because that's how the algorithm works. It serves you more of what you engage with. And there are a few already there. There's a few already on the funding opportunities database, definitely, that you could have a look at. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, if you are on the entrepreneurial track, I mean, I think you're better placed than if you're not, because most funders and investors, they want to see something that's sustainable. They want to see something that if they put in 5,000, the community will benefit 10,000, 20,000 in the future. That you just need that money to convert an idea into a business. And there is a lot of look for things like, as we talked earlier about, accelerators, incubators, micro enterprise as well, microfinance organizations that look to work with, to get interest-free loans or interest loans to small businesses. There are lots of those out there, all kinds of different levels. So it's really worth looking at how to do that. Of course, you need to think about how you position your work, because you can go from something that's more like a grant application with more vague kind of returns in terms of the impact, or you can have a business plan, which has a very solid it has a very, very solid outlook that if you put in this money, whether that be debt or equity or whatever, then you will get these returns. So you've got a whole gamut to look at there, but you must make sure that you're positioning to the funder in the right way. Also,
Super.
thinking about working in the corporate space as well. A lot of companies, when they give funding, they are looking to do that in terms of, they want to support organizations who are trying to develop business plans, etc., etc. And often, for example, if you are in a particular country, maybe in your capital city, there are international organizations. There we go. Yeah, you may find that a lot of organizations will have local volunteering initiatives where they might provide a little bit of money plus some technical expertise around developing a business plan, so it's pro bono support, which, in many ways is kind of the as useful as money, because it helps you develop your plans and everything. And then, of course, often there are little competitions and things that these corporates do. So have a look at that in your local country.
And Seth, you're in Spain. I'm also in Spain. I know that there's government help for new businesses. The EU funding is well used here. You can take free courses in entrepreneurial skills. There's some funding for like new autonomous that are signing on, and even some of the little cooperative banks are very helpful. So look outside the kind of, funder list, but also more broadly into what's available locally to you. Okay, I think we've covered that quite well. We have another question. I lost my place. Let me look again. Bear with me. Joe says this has been really useful. Thank you. She's learned a lot already. Funding readiness good. Letting funders come to us and to be ready. That has happened, and we have not been ready. So that's another point. Like it sometimes happens that you are not ready for the funding. It can happen the other way around. Like if you're maybe offered to participate in a group funding thing and you think, actually, this is not the right time for me. So that's important to honor that feeling, because what you don't want to do is commit to deliver to a funding and then fall short. Like that's really bad reputation with the funder, with your collaborators. So that's a very good and important point to bring up. She also says, I can call myself an agroecologist. I will look into this instead of saying permaculture. I need a team to support the social media. I don't really like getting drawn into social media. I need to learn how to do it without getting overwhelmed. Absolutely with you there. Social media management can be an absolute nightmare, and everyone hates to do it. I do have some tips for you that I'm not going to go into it too long because we're not here for this. However, nowadays you can pre-schedule your social media. And so if you want, you can sit down for an hour a week and plan out all your social week, or maybe 2 hours, and then you cover the whole month. And by social media, if it's targeted to get funders' attention, you want to focus not on the nice views, although those are very good and you should use them. Focus on your impact, focus on your real work, on the real results, on the connection with your community, and make it worthwhile. No, you're investing your time to do the social media, then do it well. Tag other projects if you're collaborating with other projects. Ask your colleagues and other people to repost and share and comment on your posts to amplify the impact of that post. So your let's say 1-2 hours a month that you're spending on it, it's actually an investment that returns back multiple fold. Otherwise, you have poor, you don't have that many likes or that many followers. It's actually not so important how many likes and how many followers you have, but for the funders, when they go into your Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, it's important that they see an alive organization. That, oh, look, yes, they're definitely active. They're posting about their projects. They're posting about their future plans. They're serious about what they're doing. They're collaborating. And so all of these are very important. But yes, not to get overwhelmed, you have to kind of cluster that work into focused time. At least that's how I do it, and it's the best approach that I've found. I don't know if you want to add anything more to that, Paul. No.
No. Or if you know any teenagers, get them to do it, because
They're very good
they
at it.
tend to be excellent. Yeah.
Very good. I think the new generation are definitely more adept and more tolerant, and it makes them feel less inept than us, a bit older people, perhaps. We have another one. JM says, I'm more hands in the earth guy. You're not alone, I'm sure. And the language of possible funders is very different than mine. How do I close the gap? It's a good question. I think it's about literacy. So getting used to the language, right? What do these terms mean that they're using? And sometimes I think, I remember the first time I saw, I was looking at a funder, and they were asking for something called an SRI calculation. It was the first time I'd seen it. It was some years ago now. And I thought, what the hell is this? I had to research it. And I think this is what grows your literacy, is by doing a bit, investing into doing a bit research. So then when you make your application to them, you're speaking the same language. It's like job applications, right? You want to speak to the organization in the way that the organization speaks, to show cultural alignment and also literacy, that you speak the same language as them. And of course, privately in your own home, you don't talk like this, and that's totally fine. But you have to show that level of literacy, and that requires a little bit time investment. Anything you want to add there, Paul?
No.
Okay, we have another one. What about if you're just starting and need funding to keep your head above water as you're building your project, your online presence? Are there options for the very initial stages of organizations, for setting up the organization in the first place? Very good question. There are funds for this. Not many, but they exist. And they're very competitive, so that it's difficult to access them. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, not the subject of this session, but like, this is what you call the bootstrapping phase, right? In business terminology. And where I would focus, if you're like, you've got a small project, you just got, you're running it all yourself, you have to look at the people closest to you. And actually, I know I work with a few people on this call, and they have done a fantastic job of looking around them and talking to anybody who will listen, family, friends, people at their school, anybody who will listen about their project, and seeing if you can build up a little bit of money, do some fundraisers, build up some money, build up a bit of awareness about what you're doing and that it's great. Try and start small, get little bits of money. And then what will happen is what happened. I hope one of my colleagues doesn't mind me mentioning it. What will happen is someone that you've spoken to will be sitting next to a funder at the school social or the school choir, and will mention what you're doing, and that funder will be interested, and later on you will end up with a few £1,000s for your project. So that's how you bootstrap by your own network. Don't send applications off necessarily, to random open calls if you're not funding ready, because your application will break when they start to look and see you've got no financial records, that you don't have a bank account, maybe that you're not registered as a civil society organization or whatever where you are, and they'll just say, oh, sorry, we can't fund you, and you've wasted your time. In that bootstrapping phase, really important, Focus on the people around you. Try and build up some friendly donors who can give you a bit of money. Maybe go to local companies. Try to do little fundraisers like that. That's the way to go in the bootstrapping phase. Doesn't mean you can't apply to these pockets of money, but the more local, the better. The more focused on your geographical area, the better. These international grants, very hard to get when you're very small and just starting out because of the level of due diligence involved. And you might end up, spending a lot of time and going through a lot of pain and a lot of money often to not actually then receive the funding. So that would be my advice on that. We could do a session on that, Amy, at some point, because I think the whole very early phase bootstrapping, crowdfunding that, Amy, you know a lot about, is another area you could go on. Amy, do you want to speak about crowdfunding? It's not really part of this session, but
I'm sharing the screen share from our funding readiness website. This was specifically prepared to help organizations go through the different phases of funding. And you can see here on the top, there is funding readiness, which has also links to the previous webinar we did where we went over the basics. And there's a funding readiness assessment. So like best practices, common pitfalls, all those tips that we have also covered today in more detail. Also, I think interesting some behaviors not to do, which I don't, just like Paul and maybe Maria, I also got a lot of unsolicited contacts with full on give me the money, and I'm not I have no money to give you personally. And so there's some tips there, but actually what I wanted to show you that is pertinent to this call and that Paul just mentioned is alternative funding. And this is where you can learn a little bit about different crowdfunding campaigns, how to do that, what not to do. In the room with us, and also I mentioned the co-hosts, if your organization is not registered yet, you may need to have a fiscal host to have a bank account that's basically responsibly held. That's not like, I'm not making a donation to Amy, but I'm making a donation to a serious organization. And this helps build reputation with funders and so on. So starting small, because then when you progress a bit further and you want to apply for grant funding, you can say, for this program, we have already previously raised X amount of money from X amount of donors. And like crowdfunding allows you to do that. Then there's corporate partnerships and sponsorships, which we briefly mentioned. So those are different options. You can talk to local businesses who may be able to support some of your local projects. For example, if you're running small permaculture projects for children and you want to fundraise for materials, this could be a very interesting thing to approach a local business to do. Maybe the local stationery shop, or if you're doing a forest garden demonstration and you need seeds or plants, you could approach your local garden center, especially if they want that kind of exposure. Especially you can add them onto your website as a partner, as a supporting partner. Again, if it's on the website, you can use that later to say, we're partnering with these local businesses who believe in us. The more people believe in you and the more the funders can see that, you're building your social capital, which was something we teach also in permaculture, which is very important. Then there is social impact investment, which is a little bit more for later on, I would think. And community investment and cooperative models. These are interesting especially for entrepreneurship models where you want maybe investors that get their returns in vegetable boxes or produce or resources that you're sharing with them, or fun events. So, you can pay a small amount of money membership per year to be a supporter of this project, and in return you get an annual barbecue invite or something like this. And this really helps the grassroots startup thing because it does not need a lot of bureaucracy. You can ask a fiscal host to support you. We are connected with 3 fiscal hosts in the UK, in Europe, and in the US. So you can approach us if you have no idea who to ask. Or you can ask your local permaculture association to give you some tips about who to ask, because they could also help you. You can join the collab and ask there. This is why forums and networks are so important, right? And also then on the same page, it says that you can choose your funding mix. So just like everything in life, you can pick and mix the ones that are more suitable to your projects and that lend themselves better to your style of organization. I also want to show you briefly the action checklist. This goes over how to do the foundation building, what kind of tasks you want to do, and it's more manageable this way. Instead of having a lot of prompts, or it gives you a kind of starting point, and as you go ticking along, it can tell you how far away you, how far into it you are. At the bottom, there's an implementation checklist. So you could make it a point to print this page and just go through it and tick through the processes. This resource is funded through the International Permaculture Collab as a resource for the commons for the permaculture movement. So I strongly encourage you to use it. It's built by professionals from the funding circle services. Paul is a fundraising expert. I've had also years of experience applying for grants and so on. So it's, it's not like a whisper in the wind. This is actually sage advice that's offered for free, that you have nothing to, you don't have to invest anything, but you have to really be serious about your fundraising strategy and plan and really invest into it. If you do have money and you think I could turn this little bit of money I have into some serious consultation, you can approach the funding circle services as a professional services company, which we have, and you can pay us so that we sit with you and we do that professional fundraising plan for you. We can also fund your, manage your grant. We can hook you up with the best fiscal host for your use case. We can write the grant applications for you, but that's if you have money to invest. If you're not at that stage yet, don't worry. We're offering you all that we can do for free. We are doing that. We're synthesizing the expert advice so that it's accessible on a fair share basis, right? We're getting a little bit grant money to produce this, and we're very happy to share it for free with everybody in the movement. That's a lot of talking on my part. I think that's the end of the questions as well. What do you think, Paul?
Just a couple of extra things.
Sure.
In addition to, so all of this, please do check out the website there. What I would say also is responding to, how do you get started? The whole idea of community fundraising, very localized fundraising. What we've been talking about here is, getting funders, grants, international grants, national grants, but you can also focus on local fundraising. And most countries will have an organization that can support you. For example, I'm based here in Nairobi in Kenya, and here we have the Kenyan Community Development Foundation, and they actively support grassroots organizations to develop national, and localized fundraising strategies. So you can go to them. There are courses and programs and lots of stuff, and I'm sure most countries will have those. So do try and seek those out, because they can give you really great information, because it's not just about international grants. There's a lot of opportunities to find funding, locally, as a community and within your country. And just the last thing, because it's not just about coming about the terms about permaculture and agroecology for those interested. Actually, in the collab, we are doing a piece of work on how the national agroecology strategies that are popping up everywhere around the world. You've probably seen them as a response to big agriculture. Now, many countries have national agroecology strategies. There's actually a mapping of that that you can Google, and it shows you exactly where they are and what stage of development they are. There is nothing like that for permaculture, and we are starting to investigate why, and also to see how, as a permaculture movement, we can kind of address that. So we're doing that at the moment. We're focusing on Kenya and South Africa, but we may well look at other areas. So do look out for that and get in touch if you'd like to learn more about that. But certainly, agroecology is currently the way that countries, in their national agricultural strategies, they express sustainable agriculture. But I think permaculture does have a role there as well. So that's a great conversation for us to continue to have.
Super. I've dropped the link to the collab in the chat. We will also share it in the follow-up email. Membership is free. And so please join if you would like to continue this conversation there. I want to thank our co-hosts again. That's the International Permaculture Collaborative Laboratory, the Digital Circle, the European Permaculture Network, Stichting Culture Foundation, the Permaculture Association, Raft Foundation, and, well, a little bit ourselves as well, pat on the back, the Funding Circle Services to make this happen. It may look like this is a kind of trivial thing that we organize a 1-hour event with questions, but actually many hours of preparation goes into these events. So appreciation for that to Paul and to the rest of the team who work very hard. And thank you to our co-hosts and to amplify our own impact, because if we send an invite out, we maybe reach like 800 to 1,000 people through our social media channels and mailing lists. But when PAB shares it, they also reach the same amount through their membership channels and so on. So we try and reach as many people as we can. Thank you to all of you who made it to the session. It's always good to see so many friendly faces and nice outside, especially people who are sitting outside. You can sign up to our mailing list. Our next webinar is going to be called Partnering for Impact, where we focus on how we can partner with other organizations to have joint applications and so on. And that will be on the 30th of September. In the follow-up email to this, I will also remind you, and you can then book your tickets and so on. And I look forward to seeing many of you there. I also am sharing on the screen our email. This is funding@perma.earth. Please do not ask us for money. It's a kind of joke because after every webinar, we do get some of these. But if you would like some free resources and more capacity building news, more news about funding opportunities, the CoLab membership is free. If you want to hire the team, the expert team, to give you expert sage advice and you have the funding to pay for it, absolutely email us. We would be very happy to talk with you further about that. That's it from us. 8 minutes, 8 full minutes you get back for free into your life. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.